Are you tired of being surrounded by your native language while trying to learn a new one? Are you finding books, movies, shows, and music to be too passive? Are you looking for a fun, new, and interactive way to immerse yourself in a new language?
Yes!
Then look no further. Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Legend of Sean. During self-isolation and quarantine, I discovered that so many of my video games are already localized in different languages, and that it was a perfect way to combine my passion for gaming and brush up on my language skills. Today, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to learn a new language while gaming. Let's do it!
Choose your difficulty.
Like any game, you've got to first start off by choosing your difficulty level. Most games today allow you to toggle the language of choice in the audio, text, and subtitles. Decide which of the following your level of learning is at, or start from the bottom and level up. Tier 1. The simplest way to ease yourself into gaming in a new language is to place your audio in your native language and the subtitles in the new language of choice that you're learning.
Okay, what's going on?
Pirates.
Now, don't be afraid that you're not pushing yourself enough here. Pay attention to the translations because more often than not, they're not going to be word for word. So you're going to start organically absorbing how a sentence in your native language would be translated and constructed in your language of choice. This is really useful, not to mention polishing up on your reading skills. Tier 2. Feel that you're an intermediate learner or ready to up the difficulty? Place your audio in the new language of choice and your subtitles in your native language. This will really augment your listening skills.
Tá bom. O que tá acontecendo?
Piratas.
Tier 3. Oh, you wanted a master trial! Place your audio, text, and subtitles all in the new language of choice. Now this is full immersion and it's going to be scary, but it's one of the best ways to learn. Why?
Because it's survival.
Tá bom. O que tá acontecendo?
Piratas.
Some games have no toggle option to start with and they're going to default to this tier. So in this case, you're likely going to want to have a lot of your grammar, your conjugations, and a supple amount of vocabulary underneath your belt. So that way you can still enjoy the experience without completely drowning. The best part about gaming is replay value. So whenever you're ready, you can revisit the game for a second playthrough or even a third in a higher tier than before. You'll be so surprised to see how much more fluid and natural the experience will be, as opposed to how frequently you need to stop and translate. Speaking of playing games over again, repetition. It's said that it takes the brain 7 times seeing a new word before being able to acquire it. The great part about games is that most of them rely on a similar bank of vocabulary that is repeated quite frequently throughout the game, so it's actually doing the job for you of repeating new vocabulary until it becomes second nature. The real joy is when you start to recognize your new vocabulary across different games. Seriously, from the gritty world of The Last of Us to the bubbly world of Spyro, there will undoubtedly be crossover. And don't be afraid that the new vocabulary that you're learning is too specific or niche for everyday use. At the end of the day, everything is useful. Adding to your bank of vocabulary never hurts and is always an investment. For example, I remember learning the Portuguese verb derreter, meaning to melt, from a volcanic level in Spyro, and the next day, my Portuguese professor ended up coincidentally talking about the polar ice caps melting. So, you just never know. But repetition alone is simply not enough. Make sure that you're putting those new words into use. Write them in a story, use them in a conversation, make sure that they're gaining experience. Translator. Seems obvious, but keeping a Pokédex handy for any new words or phrases that you come across while gaming, and a notebook to write new vocabulary in. There is data that supports the connection between writing and memory. Science. Google Translate is handy, but I much prefer Lingui. More often than not, words have multiple meanings, and Lingui does a great job of providing those along with example sentences for context. And if your language is spoken by different countries with different dialects, Lingui also provides differences in pronunciation as well. Cutscenes. Regardless of your tier, rewatching cutscenes is a very useful form of repetition. Try rewatching the cutscenes in each tier consecutively, gauging how much you understand right off the bat and how translations are being made. Most games include a cinematic mode where you're able to rewatch cutscenes to your heart's content, and if not, there's always YouTube. Slang. Now, the difficult part of gaming is understanding slang, expressions, and whether the translation is formal, meaning grammar by the books or grammar that's more often seen in writing, versus informal, meaning more common, everyday street use of the language. First, to address formality, generally the more recent that a game was released, the more likely it is to be up to date on common expressions and slang. So for example, The Last of Us Part 1, released 7 years ago, uses danisi to mean you, which is a bit more formal and roughly translates to screw you, whereas The Last of Us Part 2, released this year, uses foda-si, which is much more common today and much more accurately captures the sentiment of you. Hey, don't judge me. Cursing is just as culturally important too. But how will you know what expressions and slang mean? After all, they are expressions. Of course, having a friend, family member, or professor who's native to the language to translate is useful, but Lingui also does this, and where Lingui falters, there's an app for that. HelloTalk is an app where you can have conversations with people who speak the language that you want to learn, who want to learn the language you speak. It's a great mutually beneficial communication tool where you can practice the most up-to-date expressions, practice conversation, and put those repetition words into use. And those are my 5 tips that I've naturally picked up while playing video games in a second language, and I hope you find them useful too. Be sure to comment below and let me know if you found my tips helpful, if you have any tips to share. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, be sure to stay tuned for all things gay, gaming, and Brazilian. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to my repetition work. Foda-se, 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 foda-se. Yeah, I think I got it.